That's right, folks.
You want an introduction or you good?
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start the author's event. Tejas Desai, he is an American novelist and a short storyteller of Indian descent. He is the author of the multi-year award-winning, best-selling international crime trilogy, The Brotherhood Chronicle, which was written 2018 to 2020, and the acclaimed Good Americans 2013, which Purpose Review called a solid collection of rare caliber that speaks volumes about the human condition and modern life in America. He's the founder of the New Wine literary movement, which he has written about in HuffPost, New World Review, Publishing Perspectives, and other publications. He has been featured in several publications, including Thrive Global, BuzzFeed, the New York Journal, LA Post Examiner, the London Post, NYK Daily, and many others. It has been written, among other things, that in the world of literature, Desai has become a superhero, delivering readers to the ride of their lifetime. He was born, lives and writes in New York City, where he works as a supervising librarian for Queens Public Library. Ladies and gentlemen, Tejas Desai.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Tejas Desai. And I thank you very much for introducing me. So as she said, I'm the author of 4 books. One is an international crime trilogy called The Brotherhood Chronicle, and the other is a short story collection called Good Americans. It's part of a series of short story collections called The Human Tragedy. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about myself, how I got inspired to be a writer, how I got to write my books, and then I'm going to go read from my books, talk about how the books work aesthetically, plot-wise, character-wise, in terms of settings. And then I'm going to talk about the publishing process as well. My books are published in my own company, so I'm going to talk about self-publishing, different tactics and strategies you can use to do that, small publishing and major publishing as well. And then in the Q&A, we can always talk about other things as well. And the other thing I'm going to talk about as well is also the craft of writing, different strategies you can use to become a better writer. So first, let me talk a little bit about myself. My parents are immigrants from India. They came over to the U.S. in the late 70s, and I was born in 1981. When I was 8 years old, I remember writing my first stories. I actually moved from the mostly Hispanic neighborhood, Corona in Queens, New York City, to Flushing, New York, which is slightly more affluent, and it was had more Asian Americans and white Americans. And when I first got to school, I only had one friend. It was a kid who was left back for 1 grade, and he was Hong Kongese, and we were kind of hiding out from the school bully, and we kind of created our own world, our own crime world, where I would write the stories, and he would draw the pictures. And that's the first time I really remember writing down stories, although I obviously imagined it before. And I more or less never stopped. In junior high school, I was trying to write novels, I never really finished one. But by high school, by the time I was 16 or so, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I was writing poetry, getting published in many high school anthologies, winning awards. And then I went to Wesleyan University, which is not too far from here, where again I was published and won awards. And once I graduated, I knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know exactly how to accomplish that. Started working for a literary agency in Manhattan, and I realized that if I really wanted to write what I wanted to write, I would probably have to go an independent course. So I decided to become a librarian to make that a steady day job, and I got an MLS, I got an MFA in creative writing, and then I was writing, rewriting every day, trying to produce a novel. Ultimately, in 2012, I completed the Brotherhood. After kind of a dance with agents and publishers, I decided to create my own company and publish it myself. I then published Good American, which was a short story collection. I came out with the second edition of the Brotherhood in 2018. The second book of the trilogy, The Running High, 2019, and then the last book of the trilogy, 2020. So this is all through my own company. I was doing, initially I was doing all the marketing, publicity, etc. myself. Later on, I hired people to do it. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the actual process. They become Amazon #1 bestsellers. They've won awards, several awards. And so I'm very proud of the trilogy, and I'm going to read a bit from the books, tell you a little bit more about the series, how the books work, and then I'll talk about the craft of writing and publishing. So, from the first book, basically the central plot involves a character named Nero Salant. He is a down on his luck type. He tried to be a writer but failed. He lived in Brooklyn with some rich kids, and he, almost OD'd on some drugs. So he went back to his parents' house in Queens and living with his Indian parents, and he tried to rejoin a Hindu religious organization called the Brotherhood. As he does so, he also gets a job with his friend's father, who's a private investigator, a retired cop, because his father is a cop. And ultimately, his childhood friend, Priya, she's a college student at NYU. She jumps out of her dorm room building in Union Square, and it's not clear if it's a murder or a suicide, so he more or less gets involved unwittingly in his investigation into that. So the book is about that and how he investigates Vishal Patel, who is a rich hedge fund manager, also a childhood friend of his, and Priya's brother, Amrat, who is a very religious Hindu. And so it's about all these kind of complicated worlds that he comes across. And the settings of Queens are very important in it as well, very rich. We have Long Island City, Jackson Heights, Flushing, a lot of the very rich ethnic communities of Queens. So I'm going to read a little passage from a scene where Nero goes to a high-class restaurant on the East River in Long Island City, where Priya, Vishal, and Amra kind of have a confrontation. And more or less kicked out of the establishment by the ownership there. And the passage really shows you some of the drama, some of the intersections of character and class, and also how the settings work to reinforce all this. So it's a brief passage, but it really gives you a sense of all these things. So I'm going to read from that. Two big guys took him up by the shoulders. Nero yanked free. They followed him to the other door, where Martin pushed him out into the small alley. Across from him was a garage occupied by skinny, haggard men sitting on oil cans, one eating an apple, the other gritting his teeth and eyeing him hungrily. Nero brushed himself off and, trying to ignore the snickers of bouncers, stared off into the East River and the skyscrapers beyond it, watching another boat cruise across the water, imagining how Priya must have felt on that boat after her brother had confronted her. Then Nero moved the other way, down the long, empty road filled with old cars, and down the alley toward the Citibank building, and the new Long Island City of gentrification and developments. It passed that to the old one that still preserved the ghettos and the artists and the PIs and the porn producers. He told of how Amrat had stumbled down these streets that were being thrown out the same way after seeing his sister with Vishal, knowing he could do nothing about this union he despised. That gives you a very short snippet of some of the descriptions and the gritty aspects of the book and the drama and the settings. So another very major aspect of the book aesthetically is the way that Hindu mythology especially kind of plays against a lot of what's happening in the actual story. So we have the drama of the story, and then we have the Hindu mythology in the background. So this scene that I'm going to read from is right before the climactic scene of the book, actually, where a couple of the characters go to a Hindu play that's being reenacted in an elementary school that's being rented out by the Brotherhood, which is the Hindu organization, where all these characters grew up. So it kind of narrates this dance that's being performed based on Hindu myth. So I'm going to read from that. Sri Holi took place in an elementary school auditorium in Flushing, where many Brotherhood meetings and classes were held. Unlike the typical Holi celebration, where people threw colors at one another, the Brotherhood celebrated Holi by dramatizing the story of Prahlad and his father, Hiranyakashipu, usually through plays and dance performances put on by young children and teens. The story that inspired Holi was an ancient myth about a young boy who had defied his father by believing strongly in the Hindu god Vishnu. Prahlad's father, Hiranyakashipu, was a king who wanted to be worshipped as a god by all people. Hiranyakashipu tried to murder his son several times. Prahlad was stampeded by elephants, poisoned, thrown off a cliff, and bitten by snakes, but every time, Prahlad's devotion saved him. Finally, his father and his sister, Holika, sitting in a bonfire with Prahlad on her lap. Holika had received a boon that protected her from fires, but the flame consumed her anyway, and Prahlad was saved. Hiranyakashipu had received a boon from Brahma, exempting him from being killed inside or outside, at morning or night, on land, sea, or air, by thrown weapon or held weapon, or by human or animal, but he was eventually killed by Vishnu. Vishnu, incarnated as half man, half lion, emerged from a pillar and butchered him in the middle of his home's doorway at twilight, raising him up on his knee and slaughtering him with his claws. So we then get to the penultimate kind of scene of the book, which I'm not going to read because if you do read it, it will surprise you. But you can get a sense of some of the mythology in the book that comes from ancient Hindu mythology and how that reflects off the actual drama of the book. So I'm going to switch to the second book. So the first book, the crime is basically solved by Nero, but the complications lead him to be basically in debt to a criminal gang called the Dragons, which is an international criminal organization. And he ends up living in Thailand, basically in debt to this organization. He's been scarred physically and mentally from his experiences. And he's ostensibly he works for a diamond merchant, an American, named Dr. Smith. And in this scene, he's actually sent to India from Thailand, where he hasn't been since this whole event. He basically, Duncan's a diamond merchant as his front, and so he's ostensibly supposed to buy diamonds from the source. You know, by diamonds, obviously most of them are mined in Africa. They're then sent to places like Surat, Gujarat in India, and they're polished and they're sold in the West, other places. So he's supposed to be going to the source to buy it. But here he actually is somewhat duped, and he ends up being kind of seduced back into the Brotherhood, where the new leader lives in India and is trying to get him back into the fold. And you also get a sense of the new India under Narendra Modi, kind of the shift from the more socialist India to the more capitalist India. Customs was a breeze. Neil didn't remember it that way. Last time he and his parents They'd gone through customs, his parents had to open their bags and talk their way out of the bride. Outside in the arrivals lounge, dragging his bag, he searched for his cousin, Balmiki, who he hadn't seen in many years. He saw his name on a sign, but the man holding it was darker than Balmiki. Val, Nero asked, approaching. Your cousin sent me, Nero. My name is Manu. Nero trusted him for some reason, but he knew he should be careful. He followed the man to the parking lot where he placed his bag inside the trunk of a black car and got into the passenger seat. Why didn't Val come? Nero asked. He must work tomorrow morning. India is not like before. People must work. Are we heading to Surat? Of course, Nero. Please sleep. I will wake you when we get there. Nero stayed awake long enough to see the barrel fires and the dubla squatting and crapping along the road, the shanty towns that continue to pervade the New India. He saw a couple of bonfires too, but fell asleep before he could process them. When he awoke, Manu was gesturing toward the restaurant on the website. You must be hungry, he said. Let's eat some of the best dosa in Gujarat. Are we here? Nero asked. In Gujarat, Surat is still further. They pulled inside a lot. Nero could see the stars bright in the night sky. He felt the cool air that he had never associated with India, because he had previously come during the monsoon season. Two truckers chewed and spit bonnets in the road as they chatted to pass the time. Inside the restaurant, a single worker wearing a clean white apron took their order, which Manu gave with a quick flourish, Gujarati. Do they have different types of dosas? Nero asked. They have many dosas, good dosas. Eat it with your hands, you will see. Also, amazing chai. We might even have bhaji. They did. Nero was impressed. The dosa was simple and oily, but it was delicious even though he passed in the chutney. The bhaji was spicy but refreshing. He could taste the chickpeas and the potatoes. He hadn't eaten Indian food in a long time. He always avoided the Indian restaurants in Bangkok. The chai reminded him of his mother's, but he tried to repress the memory even as it arrived. He was so busy fighting his past that he didn't notice two burly men wearing janglos approached the table. A friend wants to speak to you, one of the men with a slight beard told him roughly. Nero glanced at Manu. Only a brief moment, Manu stated. You know these people? He asked. Don't worry, they won't hurt you. It's just a brief. Nero tried to rise and run, but the bearded man grabbed him by the neck and shoved him down. Then Nero saw a gun come out and rest against his heart. He was led to the back, past the kitchen, and towards the outhouse until he was stopped and forced down a secret, creaky staircase, past the mold boilers and into a plain room carpeted with an unimaginative and dull red carpet. A mandir featuring the Trinity of Gods was displayed on a slightly elevated platform. Nero also saw a large picture of Ben next to some folded chairs. Two more burly men stood by the platform. Between them sat a skinny man wearing out glasses and dressed in a white dhoti. He concentrated on an open book. When Nero was stationary, flanked by the burly man, Manu awkwardly behind him, the skinny man raised his head, smiled, and closed the book. Nero, he stated, tapping the carpet, I've waited to see you for years. Come, sit. Who are you? Nero asked, and he felt a brutal push in his back. He stumbled forward, then sat down, his feet behind him in the Buddhist manner. You know me? Why, I am your teacher. I am Bai. You're not my teacher, Nero said. Bai smiled. Your father told me you lost your faith. I do not blame you. The actions of a few apples have poisoned temporarily organization. We have recovered, and the Brotherhood is better than ever. No corruption, no violence, only love. Commitment to knowledge, truth, self-study, self-betterment, and social justice. I just had a gun to my heart, Nero said. And it goes on. So, one of the other things about the Northern High, one thing that's really been praised for about the description of the setting, the way the settings come alive, particularly in Thailand. So I'm going to read a little bit from a passage that happens on the Thai beach in Wat Hin, which is kind of a resort area notable for wealthy Thais. That story is a little bit complex, but basically Nero has at this point become a drug runner with a couple of his buddies in the Dragon organization, including an Australian named Rob. So here he is on the beach, strolling down, and he kind of comes face to face with someone from his past in the first book. And that kind of ties the books together, and well, you'll see if you read them. Bored, he ventured outside. Monsoon season had begun, and while the rain was sporadic, the temperatures had risen. He wiped the sweat from his brow, and he strolled down Narragansett, passing an Indian restaurant, curving around a Stroll Hotel bar, where tourists sat at tables against a stone barrier that guarded them from a massive cliff that dipped into the Gulf of Thailand. When he reached the stairs, he saw the Gulf itself and Wahin's uniquely pebbly beach below. As he climbed down the archaic stone stairs to the beach, he surveyed the scene. Jet skis zipped along the bright blue, wavy water, dragging paragliders, while aircraft carriers hung out against the backdrop of piers and apartment buildings. Where the water made its way into land, white girls wearing bikinis held hands, afraid to venture in, while Thai boys in their underwear twirled sticks and paced in circles, knee-deep. Thai girls in t-shirts hit each other playfully and fought over designer bags. Families sat on rock formations in the water or further back on the beach, lay up blue mats and yellow umbrellas, watching a tourist ride a wild horse while a trainer ran alongside them, shouting instructions. When he reached land, Nero began to walk along the water and saw tiny sand crabs crawling under the earth. They ran across his feet and ducked into holes, burrowing, hiding, emerging, scattering. The beach was littered with these small holes. A dead jellyfish was caked against the sand. As hot wind blew against his face, he peered toward the other side of the beach, where colorful but damaged long-tail boats were docked next to snack spots, hotels, and paths that led onto Narragansett. He noticed a woman sitting in a lounge chair, wearing a bikini and glasses, reading an old novel with Jack Collins. A chair next to her was empty, but a towel had been placed on it. Neil recognized her. Soon, she recognized him, too. They stood there, apart, watching each other. Nero wondered whether he should ignore her. But something compelled him forward. She dropped her book on the chair, took off her sunglasses, and raised her arm. She was shaking. "I'm going to scream," she shouted. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "You think I'd be this obvious?" And it goes on. So, the first book, the second book, it once again complicates the matters. A couple of times stalls, some things are not going to the third book. And in the third book, Nero has become really desperate, and he's more or less fighting to survive for his own survival, and also the survival of the Brotherhood in India and elsewhere, and trying to get out of the dragon hole that he's in of his organization. And so the third book is even darker than the first two books. It's a very fast-paced, violent thriller. And I'm just going to read a couple of passages from that as well. One can show you some of the action from the third book, and the other one will show you some of the other gender dynamics as well. Since Nero had left his motorcycle parked near the Muay Thai boxing school, he took a motorcycle taxi back to pick it up. He still held a bag of money. It was dark outside, but inside the school, he saw lights and heard the crowd. Peeking in, he witnessed one of the boxers dressed in flaming colors of red and yellow, praising Buddha with an ornate dance. Nero ran towards the warehouse and slipped into the courtyard. He could not see well, but he found the garage door and tried to slip the key into the lock. After struggling, he was able to open it. As he flipped the light switch, he heard a siren outside, then running. Quickly, he shut off the light and closed the door. In the darkness, he crept toward where he thought the staircase was. The door to the garage slid open. Several flash lights twirled around. He used her scant light to find the staircase and ascend to the 5th floor. Upstairs, he took out his gun, crept to the external staircase, and peered over the railing. He saw the 2 detectives from Chicago's warehouse and police officers holding machine guns. He realized he should have cleared the garage before eating dinner and warned Bupa not to answer phone calls unless the caller ID indicated it was him. He racked his brain over an escape route as he observed officers climbing the external staircase. Suddenly, he recalled a drain pipe on the side of the building which he could slide down. He risked falling to his death, but he would risk more if he were caught here with a weapon. He ran to the adjacent window and spotted the pipe. He would have to leap and hope he caught one of the rings casing it. He didn't see anyone below. He cursed the building made without fire escapes. Last time he had to run for his life, a drainage pipe on Unrut's roof had saved him. Now, as he climbed the window railing, bent, and positioned himself, he hoped he would have the same luck. I realized I didn't change the slide, by the way. Just to show you the books. But the next and last passage I'm going to read is a little later in the book. Basically, Neil's had a complex relationship with a transgender Thai woman, what they call Katoi or ladyboys in Thailand. So this is a scene where he's actually about to leave Thailand and probably may never see it again after many things have happened. And he kind of goes back to the same club where it all started, more or less. And he sees this ladyboy basically protected that he almost loved, and he was kind of satisfied to her at the time, the last time. Nero motorcycled to Sukhumvit. Same had not been replaced, but the sign for the upcoming club was up. The kid with no legs was back, begging next to the SkyTrain steps. Indian guys were flirting with ladyboys in front of the closed club next door. One of the ladyboys was Bupa. She was flirting with one of the Indians. Nero approached and poked her arm. She turned and smiled warmly at him. He could tell she was drunk. She hugged him wordlessly, then turned back to the other Indian. Nero was angry. "How was the full moon party?" he asked. "Good," she said, turning her head to Nero. "Very fun." "I'm going back to India, Bupa." "That's nice," she said. After only a week apart, her carefree attitude shocked him. "I saved your life," he thought. "I said I loved you. You said you loved me." The Indian turned to him and said in English, "Do you have a problem, boss?" Nero took out his gun. The Indian's hands went up and backed away. "Don't be so dramatic, Nero," Bupa said, smiling. He turned the girl's gun towards her. "I might be going away forever, Bupa. Do you understand that? Maybe I can buy a last-minute ticket for you," he said, though he knew he didn't have any money. "Nero, Thailand is my home, Nero. I love Indians, but I don't want to live in India." Shaking, Nero put the gun back in his holster. He stumbled away and began to bristle. He drove over to Soy Cowboy. He watched Sumantapat's club, Go-Go Rama. "I wonder if he's inside," Nero thought. "Another problem solved if I can get in and out." It started raining heavily. Nero realized that could help him get away. But what was the point? He was on the precipice of a new life. People like Sumantapat never died, other than old age. He pulled over beneath an awning to wait out the rain and saw tourists running through the storm, dancers wearing sailor outfits, still hustling. And inside the ornate curtains, he knew the bored girls from Isan wore bikinis as they pretended to sway to the music. Alright, so that's the last passage I'm going to read. It gives you a sense of all three books, progression of the narrative, a lot of the noir, crime, and gritty aspects, as well as some of the philosophy and mythology that's around the background of the books. There's obviously a lot of description of Thailand, of India, of New York City, of the American South, and I've traveled a lot to those places, and I've used that as research, as well as online research, to get all that stuff right. And the books have been praised for that, for being very authentic and lively. The dance for Debbie won several awards. It's, as I said, Amazon #1 bestseller as well as the Brotherhood. So, my other series is called Human Tragedy. It's a series of short story collections depicting the American experience. And the first book was published in 2013. It's 6 short stories and a 3-part novella. It's nearly 400 pages in length. And every single story has basically conflict worlds in it, by class, by race, religion, and it's meant to illuminate some of the conflicts in our society. So I'm writing the second book right now. It's called Bad Americans at the moment, and it's actually 12 stories in a framed narrative. It's more or less the Decameron meets The Bachelor, meets The Big Brother, meets upstairs, downstairs. So it's very complex. I wrote a first draft in about a year. It's about 1,200 pages long. I'm now winnowing it down, so it'll probably take me another year or so to finish it. But it's my major project, and I'm really excited about it. So I want to talk a little bit about my path, my influences, how to become an author, what it takes to become an author, whether in my case you want to make an entire career out of it in terms of writing multiple books, or if you just want to write one book, when you're working on it or you want to publish it. I'm going to talk about that, the craft of writing, and then specifically about publishing, self-publishing, and other methods as well. So, some of the things that have helped me at least is my fixity of purpose. As I said, when I was 8 years old, I started writing stories, but really by the time I was 16, I really knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life. I never wavered from that. I'm 40 now. So that's given me a fixity of purpose. No matter what else was in my way, I knew that this was what I was determined to do. But I've also, been very open. I've done research for all my books, and the Brotherhood, the first book, was rewritten over 20 times from scratch. So the plots were changed, settings were changed, the characters went through complete changes. So you always have to be open in terms of the work itself, and when you're sitting down crafting. Now, I write 5 days a week. I used to write every day, 7 days a week. I write 5 days a week, at least an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. I usually get up early in the morning before I have to go to my day job, which is a 35 hour a week full-time day job. Not everyone does that, but that works for me. And I find that really helps in terms of sustaining, a large body of work, and also just if you're working on it every day, it kind of comes to you in terms of crafting, and even the inspiration comes while you're constructing. And as I said, as someone said to me when I first graduated, I wanted to be a screenwriter when I first graduated, and one of the first people I called was a screenwriter who went to my school many years ago, and he told me, all writing is rewriting, and it's true. Whether you're writing screenplays or whether you're writing fiction, all writing is rewriting, and no matter how many times you write, it probably will never be as good as it is, but doing that, definitely tightens it up, definitely makes it a better product, so that's very important. And reading has really influenced me as well. So some of my all-time heroes I put here, Honoré de Balzac is kind of inspired the human tragedy. He has his human comedy. William Faulkner was my favorite American writer. Once again, he kind of builds an entire world out of his small sphere. In this case, it was the South. In my case, it's New York City. And Fyodor Dostoevsky is my favorite literary psychologist, I guess. Shangri Lee is probably my favorite modern author. I made a speaker when I was 16, I think. That really inspired me to Southern Flushing, where I was born and raised. It was about Asian Americans, it was very modern, multicultural. And that's really what opened my eyes that I could do the same thing, but with the Indian American experience, as I did with the Brotherhood Chronicle. Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright, very influential for me, The Invisible Man, and Native Son. And then I also got Vyas, who wrote the Mahabharata, which is the longest epic and story in human history, and one of the two major epics of the Hindu mythology, the other one being the Ramayana. But I definitely prefer the Mahabharata because of its complexity. And that, my mom used to tell me stories from it when I was younger, and I used to read books on it. There's also a 93-part series that was made in the late 80s, and it's a TV series. It's very authentic to the original script. And I kind of used the 93 chapters in the Brotherhood to kind of pay homage to that. So someone else who actually influenced me a lot is Mark Twain too. Mark Twain lived here, and we went to his house on the last trip to Hartford. And he really obviously pioneered the great American novel, and really a lot of the vernacular and stuff, which I also use in my books. So that obviously inspired me and continues to inspire me to this day. Obviously, I still read a lot of authors, classic authors, and as I'll talk about, once you get started, sort of the publishing and publicity process, building a team is important depending on where you are in your career, and obviously promoting your vision. So, first thing I'm going to talk about in terms of the way towards writing and publishing a book is the craft of fiction, right? So as I talked about, I write every day, and in this case now 5 days a week. I wrote an article about this when I was in my MFA program called The Writing Muscle. So I said, writing is like a muscle, I exercise it every day, and that's what I do. And I think that really makes you better. It's like if you're working out, if you work out regularly, if you do it the right way, you will become stronger, you will become better at what you do. So I talk about breaking stones because, as I said, the inspiration and the craft comes as you're doing it. So when I write every day, I don't necessarily know what I'm going to do, but sometimes I do, but sometimes it just comes as I'm doing it. I learn as I'm doing. So it's kind of like breaking stones, to create that sculpture or whatever. Sometimes you have a plan, and you know exactly what you want to do, but sometimes when you're breaking stones, you also figure it out as you're doing. One of the major things I think I struggled with was that I was thinking very ideologically in the beginning about my books. I was really trying to focusing kind of on the meaning, and it was really when I started with that, and then I rewrote based on character and plot, that my stories became more readable and more like real stories, and yet still maintain the thematic meaning and consistency that I always wanted. So that was a long process. It's a little easier for me now to have both, but that was something I struggled with in the early years, and I was really rewriting my books, especially The Brotherhood. As I said, I rewrote it 20 times from scratch. Some of the things you might find that you work through as you're writing are, language, making it consistent, making characters sound authentic, using correct vernacular slang if they do speak in certain ways, tone of story, making it consistent, voice of characters. You have perspective and point of view. Are you going to use first person, or you can use third person, second person? Are you going to change it up? So that's always something you have to think about, or you can again find as you're writing. And again, meaning and flow. Meaning being the themes, flow being how the story progresses so that the reader doesn't lose interest, so it's believable and consistent. Now, some of the things that you have at your disposal. So one of the things you can do to improve your craft, I did attend a lot of writing workshops, both in college, when I was studying abroad at Oxford for 1 year, and also when I first graduated from college, I was in 92nd Street Y, I took a class there, and we actually, the group that I was with, we actually ended up meeting for about 2 years at least, meeting regularly, going over our stories, and I didn't realize at the time that it was helpful, but in the long term, I definitely think it was helpful. And then I was also in an MFA program, which was a lot more intensive, where we were workshopping our story all the time. Workshopping meaning that other people are reading our stories who are also writers, and then they're basically demolishing them, right? They're like giving you lots of criticism and you're basically constantly rewriting that. At the time, I thought this was very frustrating, made me angry, but it actually did make me a better writer in the long term. I guess it's kind of a long-term process, right? The other thing is, and again, I obviously I live in New York City, so when I graduated, there are a lot of resources for me. There's a Gotham Writer Workshop, there's 92nd Street Y, there are a lot of MFA programs there. In Hartford or wherever you are, there will always be some resource for you to do that. So, definitely take advantage of that, even if it's frustrating in the beginning. The other thing that I learned to do, obviously, is research. My books are realistic, and I want to make them authentic. So, as I said, I travel a lot. I travel to places that I write about, or I travel and then I use those places to write about. My fiction is never directly reality, but I try to make it as realistic as possible. Especially with this latest book, although I've used it for all the books, my contacts are very important. If the new book, for example, is the frame story set in the Hamptons, for example, right? So I've never actually been to the Hamptons, even though I'm born and raised in New York City, lived there almost my entire life, until a few years ago. And I went there twice, and I used what I saw in my books. But I still realized I was like, I don't know if I have enough, even with those two visits. And so I remembered somebody who I had met briefly at my 5-year reunion at Wesleyan, I was like, I'm pretty sure that girl lives in the Hamptons. I thought she was actually from there, she was from Westchester, but she's lived in the Hamptons for more than a decade. And so I was like, she'll never respond, but why not? I'll write to her, right? So I wrote to her, and she never responded. I followed up, and then I got a response. And she was like, yeah, I'd love to show you around, I'll read all your stories and everything. So I was like, okay, I'll come down. And so one Saturday, I just drove there, 2.5 hours. She drove me around in her convertible, and I don't think I've ever rode in a convertible before. I can't remember, but anyway. So she showed me all the beaches, all the establishments. She told me all about the culture. And so even though I knew a lot of this stuff already, it was different getting it from the perspective of someone who lived there. So that's just one example. And I also, again, a lot of the stories from the new collection, they're from a lot of different perspectives. One's from a lawyer, one's told by a nurse. So again, I was like, oh, that guy, he's a lawyer. So I said it to him, he's like, yeah, I'd love to read it. So again, you have all these people in your orbit who can help you out and can help you with authenticity. So use it, if they're willing, they're very happy to help you. And the other thing that's important are also beta readers. So these are people who are reading the book more. This is a little bit, I guess, a later step. But it could also be your research context as well. Who are reading it to tell you, does the story work? Is the character believable? Are the settings authentic? And those are going to be your beta readers, people who are your test readers, more or less. You can work with an editor. I don't actually have an editor of my own, but I do have a copy editor. I do have a proofreader. So the books go through copy editing, and actually my copy editor is very nice and cool, and she actually edits it as well. So I guess I have a leg up in that way. But so I got her through BiblioCrunch, which is a website that's not as used as much anymore. I've tried a lot of copy editors. I just had her, and it's been one of the best things that happened to me. And she's actually an award-winning writer herself. So, and the proofreader I got through Upwork. There are many proofreaders, another website you can use, but that's a pretty efficient one. So it's recommended. And then this is again once the book is written and ready for publication, then to go through the rigorous process of copy editing, proofreading, formatting, and all that stuff. Okay, So we got into the publishing process. So obviously there are different ways to publish. The traditional publishing route usually is through agents. There are a couple of major websites you can use, agentquery.com as well as Agent in the Box. There's also Literary Marketplace, Writer's Market, and some other books you can use to find agents. They separate a small percentage of writers, and a lot of times it's just luck, whether you get one, whether or not they can hook you up with the publisher. So that's one route you can go. Just sending it out and hopefully get a response, and send out your manuscript, hopefully they'll read it. None of this stuff is guaranteed, but that is one possibility. The other way you can publish is through small or independent publishers. They usually either have contests where you can submit and then the winners get published, or they have open submissions, in which case you can just submit to them. But again, their rates of acceptance is very low. Some of them specialize in particular genres. Some of them are literary. Some of them do both. Those usually publish between 10, 20 books a year versus the majors, who obviously will do a lot more than that. So, and again, it depends. You could have a publisher and still have to do a lot of the marketing publicity yourself, depending on how much enthusiasm they have for it, depending on how much that money they put against you, however big your advance is. I've known writers who took their entire advance and put it into the publicity. So, it's really up in the air. There's nothing easy about publishing a book, no matter how you do it. The one I guess positive about that is that it opens up more doors in terms of you being eligible for certain prizes, like a Pulitzer Prize, for example, or getting reviews in major publications, like the New York Times or places like that. But again, even if you do it that way, the likelihood of that is pretty small. So the other way, and there's academic publishers as well, kind of function more like smaller independent publishers, but their presses are obviously through schools. And then there's the other way, self-publishing, which I've done. I like it because I get to retain my independence. It's been hard, it's been more work, but it also ties with the way I want to do things, which is my way. So now I created my own company in 2012. It's called The New Way, and I still have it. I still publish through it. It's an LLC, and every state has different rules about how to create this, different ways to maintain it. So you can read about that in New York State, in their particular rules. In Connecticut probably has different rules. Now you don't have to do it that way. You could. There are self-publishing companies who will do it for you. My friend BJ is there. He's self-published through using BookBaby, I think, right, which is a kind of an aggregate vendor. It's not really a publisher, but it helps you self-publish by doing a lot of the stuff for you, like cover design or marketing and stuff like that. Stuff that I will get independent contractors to do, right? Because I'm literally doing everything myself. But there are also companies like Libris and others will do a lot more of it by yourself, but again, you kind of lose more rights and stuff. In my case, I have all my rights. I retain everything. So, the vendors will use, usually, some people like Amazon, some people don't. It's been a boon for me personally. My books are published widely and available widely, but I definitely get the most purchases and everything on Amazon, especially through ebooks. I would say 90% of my sales are ebooks, and even most of the print purchases happen on Amazon. And if you limit your ebooks to Amazon to Kindle Unlimited, you can get people to read it on Kindle Unlimited, and you get paid that way as well. So have 2,000, 3,000 pages read or something like that a month, and based on that, I'll get a certain amount of money based on the pages that have been read. In addition to the actual sales of the ebooks, right? The other vendors are Apple, iBooks, and Barnes & Noble with the Nook, and there's Kobo, and there are a few others. But as I said, both 10 years ago and now, there's no real comparison. Amazon, for me at least, is the best bet. On the print side, it's widely available. So the first few books I did directly through Amazon. And in this case, I did it through Amazon and also through Ingram, which is one of the vendors that bookstores and libraries use. And there's a whole thing with that too. You can ask me more about that if you want. But there are pluses and minuses to both. But through Ingram and through Amazon, they're available on Barnes & Noble, Indie, Brown, pretty much all the ways you can buy books. So the main thing really is marketing and publicity, and people know about you. And yeah, format and cover design. I have Christine, my copy editor, she also does that for me. So when I first started out, I was doing pretty much all the marketing myself. I was creating my own flyers, I was going to book conferences, festivals, talking about my book, selling my book, doing author talks like this. When I published my the second edition, the first book, and also the letter to the trilogy, I hired a marketer and a publicist, and they did a lot of that for me, and especially through Amazon, and that's how the books became #1 bestsellers in certain categories. So you can do that, or you can do it yourself, but I found that to be very effective. But it depends who you get, of course. They're not all created equal as anything else. So one of the ways, ironically, to up your sales is by giving it away for free. This kind of seems counterintuitive, but I've given my book away for free, got thousands of downloads, and yet the same day or the next day sold many books as well. So, or reading other series, but even the same book. So that'll get people reading it and get a lot more reviews, but also will up sales as well. And Amazon has it, but Goodreads also has this as well, print books. And there are websites that you can pay a small amount, and they will do advertising for you that your book is free. And that's really helped a lot as well. Fussy Librarian is one of them. E-Reader Today is another one that's been helpful. And there are some other ones that aren't as helpful. But that's something I would recommend. Again, you can spend money, you can not spend money, it's up to you. But I would say if you're spending money, you should spend it wisely. I realize how to spend it wisely. Ads are somewhat effective and important. I advertise on Amazon, I've advertised on Facebook, I've advertised on Publishers Weekly and other places. I did have my books available to some indie bookstores, particularly the Book Review in Long Island. That then closed down, so it's no longer available there. But there are indie bookstores you can work with to have your books available. Word of mouth is probably the most important thing as with anything else. And social media can help with that. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, all these sites. I have 22,000 followers, especially on Facebook. So that helps in terms of getting the word out. Book festivals, book conferences, reading at libraries like this one will help you. And there are grants as well. I was telling Anale about the reading I did with the musician, the hybrid performance. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But that was through a grant that I got through Cindy Artist Corps. So that's important as well. As I said, you can hire a publicist. One of the things they can get you are reviews. That includes, an independent site, independent magazine sites, journals, on Amazon, etc. One of the major things that is helpful also is a pre-publication strategy. So if you're publishing a book, 3 to 6 months out, you can have a plan of having readers read it and review it even before that. And get the buzzword out. And NetGalley is one site that helps you do that. You'll have your books on there, subscribers especially. That includes people who are in the industry as well as independent readers who are very excited about reading new books. they can download it and read it and write a review. And Mecca is on the only site is just the most popular right now. The other thing that got me are interviews. I've been interviewed in BuzzFeed and Pride Global, and a lot of major online sites and publications. I've done radio, I've done TV interviews. So that's another way to get your message out and your books out. Obviously, I tell you about social media. There are also email lists. I don't do this as much, but it's also another effective way by emailing people to get your message out and having these listservs and stuff. Awards contests. So there are a lot of independent awards out there, and most of them are not free to enter your books, and they are very competitive. But in my case, The Dance Towards Death has won, I think, at least 8 awards, 6 and 8 awards, and so that's up my credentials. And Brotherhood as well has won a couple of awards. So there are also articles you can write as well. I've written articles in HuffPost, Publishing Perspectives, other publications about literature, about publishing, and my journey of being an author. And of course, there are readings and events like this one or others that you can read at. So telling you about the hybrid performance updates. This is something I'm working more on. So this is something that I wanted. Initially, it was actually something that someone at the Queens Library approached me and said, "Oh, I know this musician who really wants to work with other people, and would you be interested in doing a reading with him on a hybrid performance?" I was like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." He's a Hall of Fame. He's in the Music Hall of Fame. His name is Greg Holt. He's also a fiddler for Tampa Bay Lightning. He has a band, and so initially we were going to do it right before the pandemic. That's scheduled, I think, March 20-something, 2020, and then we were shut down a week before that, so I couldn't do it. It was canceled. But then, about a year later, one of the librarians at our central library again contacted me and said, "Oh, he still wants to do it. Do you want to do it?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So it was a bit of a process, but I got the City Artist Corps grant. He was working with the MTA Music Undergraduate Program anyway, so we kind of teamed up with that, and we ended up doing it in the Union Square subway station between 2 platforms that were busy, and so people were coming by. And we filmed it, and we broadcast it on Facebook Live and YouTube, so we got a lot of hits that way. So it was a really fun, innovative program that I really am proud of doing. And now I'm working on a dance musical based on the Brotherhood Chronicle. So I'm working with a Guyanese, a transgender Guyanese dancer and his troupe to try to bring that about. That might take a little bit, but I'm not going to answer. But yeah, I'm trying to get a grant for that as well. So we'll see how it goes. So I've really been following a lot of independent authors that a lot of people don't know about, and these are some of the ones I've come across. Brienne I just met, even though I followed her for 10 years. The other two I've never met. But Brienne Walsh is a blogger. She writes probably the best blog I've ever read in terms of her prolificness, how gripping it is and how diverse it is. She lived in Brooklyn for about 10 years. Again, I started following her, I think, in 2010. She still writes the blog prolifically. Most bloggers, aren't very consistent, but she's very consistent. And she also is an independent author, freelance writer, and art critic. I still follow her blog to this day. She moved to Savannah recently. I've never met her. We've been in the same city. I've never met her for more than a decade. I was in Savannah for a trip, and I ended up meeting her there, for the first time. She has kids and a family and everything. She still blogs. So I really admire her blog. You should check that out. Jay Sizemore is a poet. He's a bit controversial. He's been kicked out of Amazon and AWP conference in a lot of places. But I kind of admire his courage, and his poetry is interesting. He's kind of like the Rambo, I guess, of our time. And Tejas Desai is a gay African-American fiction writer, but fiction is very provocative and realistic. And I kind of just discovered him at the library, just to pick up his book, and I was like, wow, this is really good, very interesting. So I read a couple of other books, and they were really good as well. So, yeah, check out their work. You can. VJ, who's in the audience right here, is also an independent poet. He's written 3 books. Latest one, Breakdown Dancer, which is really interesting. Has a playlist as well as poetry. Escape from Samsara, Celebrity Sadhana, and that's his 3rd book. So he's really grapples with Buddhism and the urban, kind of the urban modern experience. Those 2 things intertwine. So yeah, check out his books if you get a chance. My friend Casper here has made a film called EEE the Movie, and has written a couple of books as well. So yeah, a lot of independent writers writing interesting stuff. So definitely check it out. I have on my website. I listed some other ones as well. You can check it out. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of my talk. I'm available for Q&A. I'm available for email. They're very easy to find. I have a website. You can message me through there. My email is thenewway@gmail.com. Website is tejas-desai.com. As I said, I live in New York City, born and raised there, but I do travel, so yeah, hit me up if you want. And that's pretty much the end of my talk, so if you have any questions, I can answer them. But otherwise, thanks for having me, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, yeah.
Each book you write, do you travel all the time for that's to get a feel of the selling for your book? Do you always travel?
Okay, so the question is, do I travel to get the feel of the book for every book, right? So it depends. So, for example, when I was writing The Brotherhood, which is almost all set in New York City, I had traveled to Thailand 3 times already, and I was already thinking in my head, I already had the books in my mind that it would be set in Thailand and India. I went to Thailand the first time in 2005, actually. A friend of mine from college had done the Peace Corps in Kenya, and then he had moved to Thailand just so he didn't know what to do with his life. So he was living there. And so he invited me over, and so that's why I went, just randomly to visit him. And then I was like, oh, this is a pretty interesting place. And I saw I'd grown up with Hinduism, from my family, and obviously, my parents were from India, so I've been back there many times. And I just really saw the dichotomy as well of life in Thailand under, their version of Buddhism, and also life in India. So I thought I could play with this dichotomy. A lot of my work is about dichotomy and conflicts in the world. So, and then I went back in 2010 and again in 2011 by myself. So again, I was thinking about it, but it's not like I was constantly writing down, oh, I should set a scene here, or I should set a scene there. Like the scene that I read in Wahen, I was in Wahen in 2010, my second trip to Thailand by myself. And that scene is based on the fact that I was walking on the beach there. So that's why it's so vivid, right? But I didn't write anything down. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna write a scene set here, But because it was so vivid, it stuck with me. And then later on, I went back to the pictures that I took and everything else to get it more accurate, to help me. But the inspiration came when I was doing it, and later on, I decided, oh, let me set a scene here. So it isn't always that I want to write a book and I want to set it here and then I go there. Sometimes it happens before, sometimes it happens during, sometimes it happens after. In the new book that I was describing, it's more like that because I'm like, oh, I want to set it in Hampton, I want to set it here, I set it here. I want to have it through the perspective of a lawyer or a nurse or something like that. And then yes, I'll kind of do research on that, I'll write it, and then I'll send it to somebody who is an expert in that and say, does this sound authentic? Does this seem right? Or even before that, I will talk to that person on a daily basis. So it really depends. As I said, it's kind of like breaking stone. It's not always straightforward in my case. And some might say that's inefficient. I don't know. but that's the way it kind of works. Sometimes it's not always, it's unexpected, you know. One of the themes of the Brotherhood Chronicle is expect the unexpected, and a lot of stuff is unexpected. Sometimes things work, you know, expected to, or things happen, you know, you get stuff when you don't expect it. You're welcome. Any other questions?
How did you get so many Facebook followers?
Casper asked, how did I get so many Facebook followers? So in 2012, so I've been on Facebook since 2005, right, when it first started, when it was like this elitist thing for people who went to like elitist schools. So at the time, I think I was also on Friendster, which was the big thing at the time. And I was on Facebook, and you know, I remember my girlfriend at the time, so was like, "Oh, you're on Facebook, but you're not really on Facebook. You don't really post that much, you know, whatever." And then we ended up breaking up. And then, funnily enough, when I started, when I published this book, I was like, "All right, I need to become big on social media." So then I started posting a lot about the book, but also I started advertising my pages a lot on Facebook. And that's how I got a lot of followers. My own page, I kind of got a lot of followers just because I knew a lot of writers and they knew a lot of writers. So a lot of writers started following me and friending me, or vice versa. And then also a lot of Indian people in India, for whatever reason, you know, like, oh, it's an Indian writer. So they started friending me too. And that's how I got a lot of followers, like 5,000 friends and I think 1,500 followers on my primary page. But also even my pages, I created a lot of pages. I created one for Good Americans, created one for Brotherhood, created one for myself, created one for the UA. And all of these I advertised, and that's how they got a lot of followers as well. So by 2000, even the same year, 2013, I already had most of the 20,000 I still have. And of course, you know, people will leave, people will come. But yeah, but that's relatively consistent. Yes.
So, the Brotherhood, have you ever participated in any?
Can have I what?
Ever been in any your mouth? Have
So-
you ever been in another organization?
Have you been in a cult?
Oh, have I ever been in a cult? Okay. So yeah, so I did grow up as part of an organization. So when I was younger, my mother especially, she was in an organization that a Hindu religious organization. It was more like a day school where you learn, you know, Hindu religion, about the Hindu religion, all these different prayers and stuff. They had functions where they had dances, they had lectures, and you know, we would also play basketball. We would go to summer camps. So I went to summer camps when I was a teenager. I was always an agnostic or an atheist. I never really believed in. I mean, it's influenced me, but I was never religious. I never particularly liked it, but it definitely influenced me. So I mean, yeah, I gotta say that organization was the inspiration for it, but I wouldn't exactly say it was a cult, but I would say it influenced it. And again, the Brotherhood in the book isn't really a cult per se. It's definitely an organization with particular. It's kind of trying to find more or less the real Hinduism, I guess, through this. But it does. But again, it changes from the first book to the second book. The first book is more of a liberal organization, and in the second book it becomes more cult-like because of the leader who is promoting it. So you see how, you know, any ideology or any organization can be corrupted based on who's leading it, and you know, and the different kind of structures that they will try to use to manipulate it. So that could be in any religion or any ideology, right? So I use that as a basis for it, but it's not really about that per se. It's just using that as an example of how it works. Yes.
Bad American book coming out, but are you going to have different regions of the country, or is it going to be New York City based?
Oh, that's a good question. So the question is whether Bad American, the second book of the human tragedy, which I'm writing right now, is going to be set in different regions of the U.S. or whether it's going to be set in New York City. So yeah, that's something I grappled with when I was first writing it as well. When I decided that it was going to be pandemic based and that people were going to be kind of housed in the Hamptons, I realized that they probably wouldn't go very far for that, most likely. And also, even myself, I was traveling locally a lot during the pandemic, where I wasn't traveling across the country as much. I did do a road trip across the US in 2016. I did one just a couple of months ago. And I've traveled a lot in the US, but found that I wanted to kind of base it in New York City and also the immediate environment. So Connecticut, New Massachusetts, Maryland, that kind of general area, Hartford. So yeah, it is more New York City based, but of course, New York City and Queens specifically, there are people from all over the world, right? People who are born in different places, different cultures. So a lot of that is incorporated in the book in terms of people who are from different cultures or immigrants or first generation. And that's also accounted in the book as well. So I decided to set it there, but I would say the third book probably will have more region, and that's why I've been doing all these trips and stuff, to get a better sense of the entire country. But in the pandemic itself, I figured kind of like the Decameron, where they kind of, from Florida and just go to the countryside, right? It's a little bit more complex in the COVID pandemic because we had Zoom and all that stuff. But for the people actually going to the Hamptons from an area, I figured it was more realistic that they would be more local. It was also easier because I didn't have to do all the accents from like St. Louis or the South or whatever, honestly. But yeah, I think probably the third book will incorporate that one.
And what will be the title of that?
I do have the title of the third book, but I'm not disclosing it yet.
Coastal Americans?
It will have Americans in it. I'm just not revealing the adjective.
Mediocre American.
No, it's not that, but it'll be a little sexier than that.
So I got a question.
Yeah, sure.
So when you're writing in the process, is it more the story is creative versus your experiences that you find, or do you just take an experience and then embellish the whole experience to get the story?
Right, so the question is, when I'm writing, do I use an experience and then embellish on it, or do I kind of do the opposite, basically, create the whole thing, and then use the experience, use the experience to
That's possible. It can happen.
Yeah, so again, it depends, right? So something I do one, sometimes I do the other. Kind of like to call it extrapolation, so I kind of use an experience as the basis for something, and then I'll extrapolate based on that. So, obviously I've never run drugs or murdered anybody or anything else. I don't think I have anyway. But I'll use the settings and, I do a lot of online research as well. So I'll really incorporate a lot of that as well in it. And then reinforce that with someone who knows what they're talking about, right? So it could happen one way where having experience and I'll use that. Or a lot of times actually I find, for example, there are a couple of settings in Thailand in the book, Run and Hide, especially in Thailand, where I've never been. I've never been to those places. But I went and I researched it and I tried to make it alive based on that. A lot of them I have been to, but it's not necessary. And some of those things are some of the liveliest descriptions. So it really depends, yeah. It's not an exact science.
What do you think about increasing discoverability on the internet? Like, do you do a lot of search engine optimization, or how do you increase your discoverability? Since you have so many themes that are probably searched for a lot, how do you?
Okay, so the question is, how do I increase discoverability on the internet?
Or in general?
Yeah, I think doing a lot of these things that I've talked about, which is writing articles, having social media followers, having the publicity, the reviews, everything, that kind of generates itself. And so, people have talked to me about search engine optimization. I've never actually paid anybody to do that. Even my marketer didn't do that. He did different things on Amazon, for that, but I've thought about doing it. I thought about paying Google, for example, to put my name out there. And a different guy with my name, by the way, does do that. He's a dentist or something. I find something when I Google myself that dentist is up there. But I'm still pretty high up there because people are going to my site, So clearly it's been organic that it's worked because of all these other things. If I did that, it probably would help me, but I haven't done it yet. So again, doing all those other things will increase word of mouth, will increase people going to your site, will increase people buying your book and knowing about you.
How long ago your website for your
Question is how long I've had my website?
website? Yeah.
How long I've had it up?
Yeah, how long?
So the website has been up since 2012, at least. Not, I think actually it was earlier than that. It might have been 2010 or 11 before I published the first book. It was designed differently though, whereas now in 2018, 17 or 18, I did an entire marketing strategy where I did a GoFundMe campaign, I did into marketing videos, and that's when I also rebuilt the site. And the previous site, I had paid someone to do it, but then by 2018, there was an easy way to do it on your own. And so I did it on my own, and it actually looked much better. So, yeah, and I've had a lot more hits, obviously, just because the trilogy came out, this and that. But yeah, so I would say probably 2010, 11, but then the refurbished portion of it, 2018. Yes.
Do you incorporate like current events, and specifically are you going to write about like the pandemic?
The question is, do I incorporate current events? So yeah, I mean, the book about America is set during the pandemic. It's actually set in the summer 2020. So there's like that pivotal moment in the pandemic when everybody, at least, and there's another reason it's so specifically in New York City, because we were under lockdown, right? And based on that, things that happened during lockdown and also afterwards, that was the reason we decided there. And so I used a lot of the things that were happening at the time, and also with George Floyd, and the riots, and this and that, and the other thing. Politics plays a big role. I didn't want to make that too big of a focus, especially considering people are going to be reading it for 10 years, 20 years down the line. But there's no way that you can write something like this and be realistic and not have that as a major factor, because we're so divided and we're so, all this, especially at that time, all this stuff was happening with race, with the pandemic, and everything else. That has to be a major factor in it.
The election.
And the election doesn't happen yet in summer 2020. But again, those wins were, again, people are, we have like people who are very pro-Trump and right wing, people who are very left wing. And that, this is the earlier story, that played an important part. And then that kind of dissipates as people get to know each other and stuff like that. So, in the internal story. And that also affects the stories that are told in the book as well. So, but even in the Brotherhood Chronicle, I incorporated the Great Recession in the Brotherhood, the first book. That plays an important role in the setting and the plot, and a lot of the things that kind of we're going through. And and actually the plot in Thailand and in India as well. The Indian plot kind of incorporates a lot of the Hindu-Muslim tension that had happened, especially with the train burning and riots. That's incorporated in the book. And in the early Narendra Modi years, he was the Prime Minister of Gujarat, and then also in the Thai narrative, there's a big role of the Thai military. And actually, at the time that I wrote it and published it, we didn't have the coup yet that the Thai military then ran the country. But there was always that possibility. And that doesn't exactly happen here, but the Thai military and the police and stuff played a big role in the book. So that's kind of clairvoyant, I guess. But yeah, I always incorporate those things.
One last question for me. So you said that you knew that you wanted to write from an early age, right? 8 you started writing. So what is it about the writing that brings you the most pleasure, in the sense of thinking of something to write about and starting it, or the process of, doing the whole thing or finishing it and having it complete?
Okay, that's a really good question. So the question is, I've been writing most of my life since I was inspired, driven to do it. So what is the most pleasurable part of it? Is it the writing? Is it coming up? Is it coming up with the idea of the story? Is it writing it? Is it finishing it? I don't know. I'm not really sure, honestly. I think I was asked this question, what I think I'm constantly asked this question. Do you enjoy writing? You must enjoy it. I'm not even sure I enjoy it, honestly. I mean, I don't do it because I enjoy it. I do it because I'm driven to do it. And I'm not sure I completely understand why. But, so which part do I enjoy? I know I have to do it. I know I have to complete it. I know I have to make it the best it is. And as I've done all of it, from the beginning process to crafting, to publishing, and marketing, and publicity, you know, I mean, it feels good to be in a magazine. It feels good to have your picture up, you know, in a major publication, to have like 100 likes on your post, you know, to have people commenting about it, to have people writing great reviews, it's the best book I've ever read, or whatever. That feels great, of course. But it's a pleasure to the craft process too, even when you're struggling with it.
So you like the challenge?
I do like the challenge. I love the challenge.
That's what it's all
yeah,
about.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. Honestly, it is. And I write books that I feel like that I want to be challenging to the reader too, both in terms of content and in terms of style as well. I think a lot of people have criticized The Run and Hide, especially, or even The Natural Death, would be kind of hard to follow because there's so many characters and settings. Some people love that, some people don't like it, but I kind of did that on purpose in the sense that, first of all, it's very noirish, right? There's kind of sense of confusion that permeates the narrative, but challenging the reader is part of what the aesthetic is, part of my goal as a writer, both when I write it, which is challenging, and also for them to get the full experience out of it as well.
So you like to engage the reader as much as
I like to engage them and I like to challenge them, both, which, you know, all the reviews say I do, whether they like it or not, so. Anything else? All right, thank you. You've been very well. And yeah, you can always reach out to me. I'm very accessible. So, thank you for having me.